Could have went for the Bloody Mary this morning.
Oh, that was such a good move. I'm still waiting for the coffee to get coursing through my veins here. It's just good I remember that it was Friday, not Saturday. I woke up feeling Saturday.
Oh, it's Friday. And what is up, Awesemo? PeteyMac along with Terry McBride here. And one thing that's nice about Friday, we got a lot of baseball to be breaking down here. A 14-game slate tonight. Which should be a lot of fun. These are my favorites, Terry. And now you got your Yankee shirt on. You can actually look forward to a game maybe. The offense woke up, exists, is a thing.
We'll see. We'll see if that was a little outburst or something they can sustain and build on and turn into the actual Yankees. It's been ugly so far this season. I mean, I'm not a person to overreact to small samples, particularly in baseball or anything, but man, it has just been rough getting off the ground for my Yanks this year. So, yeah, hopefully signs of life and get things rolling out in Cleveland now. So we shall see.
You always got to love New York baseball because Aaron Boone's on the hot seat, Luis Rojas is on the hot seat, and it's April 23rd. Like, what are we doing?
Stanton, I think, got out in his first at-bat this year, and the fans were booing. I mean, come on. It's like,
yeah. Dude, they were booing on opening day at Yankee Stadium. They were booing on opening day at Citi Field. It's like, you weren't even allowed to go to a baseball game for the last year. You'd think there'd be a little bit of patience, but no. I mean, all in, right away. That's how it is. That's how it goes.
That's New York, man. That's the grinder. Some people can't hack it, and they you see them wash out, and a lot of that tends to be narrative, I think. But some people, I think it is true. Just the way the papers and everything treat people here is a little different, a little harsh. And the fans, a lot of my fellow Yankee fans are. I don't boo my own. I might be disappointed in them. You know, I'm more I'm disappointed in you. I'm not angry at you kind of a fan. So I don't
Okay.
boo my own guys. But yeah, a lot of my fellow Yankee fans tend to.
So you weren't booing Derek Jeter when he had an 0 for 32 or whatever it was all those years ago. I mean, some of the stuff's unbelievable. Otherwise, last night, I know I had a lot of Mike Trout last night. That was kind of unfortunate. You come in, you get hit by a pitch in the first inning, take your 2 points, and done, out of the game. It's like, killing me.
Yeah, I hate to see that, especially, spendy guy like that, but he was landing in a lot of my lineups when I was crunching things. A lot of the one-off spots he was occupying. I tend to try and force that down a little bit just because I don't like getting guys to, 40% as a one-off or anything like that in my lineup. So I was doing a little cosmetic surgery on it, so it didn't hurt me that much. But it was just a weird night last night. Like, I had a ton of Christian Javier, who had a nice game. I had a good amount of the Mariners with a lot of Mitch Haniger. They were my top stack of the day. They took a while to come through, but ended up coming through. Haniger hit a home run. And
extra innings, baby.
One of those nights. Yeah. It was just one of those nights where I had the pieces, but not all together in the right spot, So it was a little frustrating total results wise. It was like like 60% or maybe something like that. It's a little bit of a rough one, but we persevere. I like this slate today.
Push through. And yeah, we got a big slate, 13 games. We got Coors Field in play, a number of top aces going at one another here. So let's start it up with the A's and the Orioles. Not one of those top ace matchups here. In fact, Oakland is looked at as a top stack based on our numbers at Awesemo. So Cole Irvin, Jorge Lopez. Terry, what do you make of this?
Yeah, it definitely seems like a spot for bats, right? We've got Irvin, a left-hander, going up against the Orioles lineup. They're a little frisky, game in Camden Yards. I can always get behind that idea. If I was going that way, I would potentially look at some of the power bats. Cedric Mullins is fine up top because he gets on base in front of those guys. But for me, primarily looking at the Orioles, it's about the Mancini, Mountcastle, Michael Franco, Pedro Severino, Austin Hayes, those guys in there. Unfortunately, we don't have Anthony Santander, who is their best power bat, unless we're counting Mancini. But I think there's a lot to like in that going up against a rookie lefty. Irvin is, 15 innings so far this year, 16.2% strikeout rate, so just not sitting anybody down. Decent on the xFIP with a 4.41 and a 1.15 whip, but just not a ton there, not a very high pedigree guy. So I think we could throw Orioles bats, and then definitely coming back the other way, I can absolutely mash some of these A's stacks in against Jorge Lopez. Struggling guy, struck out 28.8% of hitters, but he's given up a handful of home runs so far this season, and just a guy that I think we can attack with some of these bats. So like a Matt Olson, Matt Chapman, obviously. Mitch Moreland, if he's in the lineup, he's in the projected as a stud, we know, against weak righties. So I can always get to Mitch Moreland as part of stacks. And then the top end of that lineup is kind of interesting with Canha, Ramon Laureano, and Jed Lowry there. Lowry is kind of, surprising. A guy who was gone, came back. He had been had a breakout year at age, I think it was 34, and then struggled for 2 years at the Mets. Now back in Oakland at 37, kind of getting it done, hitting third in this lineup. So weird little spot there. But for me, it's about the power bats in the middle. And then I prefer, if I'm taking one of the top three, probably Ramon Laureano. No real love for either of the pitchers in this one at all.
No, and it's amazing what the A's are doing. They've now won 11 games in a row, sitting there at 12-7. I know this is kind of like old hat. It seems every year it's like, well, how are the A's doing this? And yet, there they are, and they're tied with Seattle of all teams at the top of the AL West, just like everybody had.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's two horses at the beginning of the year. But yeah, it's just A's baseball, man. That's what they do. They figured out the formula to win baseball games without having a bunch of superstars on the team and a bunch of ridiculous salary. They just play baseball. Traditionalists might not even say the right way because it's a different way. They, kind of were the team that kicked off the whole Saber and everything, the advanced metrics thing. But it is the right way to play baseball in terms of how the game actually functions under the covers. So yeah, it's fun to watch, and it'll be fun to see if they get out to that 20 range and Billy Bean goes for a drive again, listening to his daughter's mixtape or whatever that was.
Whatever works. Keep you from watching the games and being a part of all that. But I think it might be a little more relaxing for the A's tonight going up against Jorge Lopez there. But remember, if you're not able to watch your favorite Awesemo shows on YouTube, almost all of our Awesemo YouTube shows are available through the Awesemo Podcast Network. We've got a podcast for every single sport. We're available on every major platform. So you can head on over to awesemo.com/podcast to check out the latest. And if you leave a 5-star rating and review one of our podcasts with your Twitter handle or your email address, you'll be eligible to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. One winner is awarded every Friday. Somebody will be rewarded today, and reviews will be eligible to win for up to 1 year. So make sure you head over there, take care of that. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, give us a like, certainly subscribe, know when the shows are coming at you. And get that brain humming for a big Friday night or whatever the day might be on the MLB train as we're on right now. Next up, Jacob deGrom. He's been amazing for the Mets. Nearly set a record last game. Struck out 9 in a row against Colorado. Couldn't quite get that 10th. 0.45 ERA for deGrom. Actually won a game. Got you those extra points last week when the Mets were able to come through in the 7th inning in Colorado. Eric Fetty going for Washington, but is this a night where you pay up for Jacob deGrom against a division rival?
Yeah, I think it's totally justifiable. Of course, it's Jake deGrom. So I'm never going to argue with somebody who wants to do it. 12.5, you're paying full freight. I mean, you were getting no discount whatsoever on FanDuel. 10.9 on DK. All right, it's a little bit more in line with some of these other guys. On a slate where we've got a number of very top starters, he is still projecting as one of my absolute top guys. There's a couple other names in that range, but then some of the names that I would expect to be projecting out pretty strongly, some of the other top end aces, your Clayton Kershaws of the world, your Yu Darvishes of the world, on my numbers, they're down the board a little bit. Not saying they're getting beat up or projecting poorly, but they're not projecting out to those monster games. They're projecting for around average games. So like for Kershaw and Darvish in particular, they're going up against each other, LA against San Diego, two tough lineups. So that's kind of why that's coming out in the wash. I'm getting really good numbers on Glasnow, but he's also very expensive. So yeah, I think it makes sense to just pay for Jake deGrom, and there are plenty of bats to shop around for. We've got good pricing on a lot of good bats here on this slate. So I think there's a lot of ways to get to him. So absolutely going up against the Nationals lineup, it's a good lineup overall, but there are definitely holes here, and there are definitely strikeouts. And a guy like Jake deGrom doesn't need a bunch of holes in the lineup to put up just a dominant start or put up a 10, 11, 12 strikeout kind of a game. So I have no issues rolling deGrom here. Washington this season against lefties, against right-handed pitching. Washington this season only a 21.7% strikeout rate. So that is 5th in the league. So they are pretty good limiting the strikeouts in the small sample, but they're creating runs 21% worse than average. They've only hit 8 home runs against righties, a 0.125 whip, ISO. So I think there's plenty of narrative around the deGrom just being able to smoke this team.
And keep in mind, the Nationals don't have Juan Soto. He's on the injured list. So that's a compromised lineup. You start looking at the middle of it. It's like Trey Turner, Josh Bell, Kyle Schwarber, like, okay, there's a little pop there, but it's not the Nationals of yesteryear when you start looking at this lineup without Soto in it.
Yeah, for sure. One of the best bats in baseball, young up and coming kid, and just a true superstar already. So yeah, that thins out the middle of this lineup pretty significantly. You do still have the Turner, Bell, Schwarber. I would even throw Castro into that mix as a professional hitter, at least still. That's a little bit of a tricky spot to roll through, but we're talking about Jake DeGrom. It's not going to give him much trouble. If Kyle Schwarber turned on one and drove one out and they, that was the only hit and run that the Nationals scored, it wouldn't totally shock me. But I don't think there's any real threat to Jake DeGrom here.
Unless the bullpen comes in, then all bets are off as far as the Mets go. The Mets coming off a rough series against the Chicago Cubs. Were swept there, lost in extras last night, long game. Now they're back in New York here. They go up against Eric Fetey. Any interest in the Mets offense on this night, which, like the Yankees, been underproducing to this point?
Yeah, they've been underproducing to this point. They've underproduced for me a few times in DFS, but I think I'm going to go right back here. I don't think all that much of Eric Fetey as a pitcher. Out to a decent start this year in terms of his strikeout rate, 28.3%, but we're talking about 11 innings over 3 games. Also walked 11.3% of hitters in that sample. Much more like the pitcher who struck out 12.6% of hitters last year, 12.3% the year before in 128 combined innings with over a 5x FIP. So I think this is a targetable spot for some of these Mets bats. I like the pricing on the Mets bats as well. They'll help you get to their pitcher. So stacking DeGrom with his own offense, particularly on Fanduel, looks very, very doable here. There are some very good prices. Pete Alonso for 32, Michael Conforto for 2,700 against a bad righty is ridiculous. Jeff McNeil, 2,400. I can go down to JD Davis, James McCann if you want to grab a catcher at the bottom of the lineup. And then the obvious names, with Nimmo, Lindor, and Dom Smith up at the top. That's a good lineup at a way too cheap a price. I imagine they're going to draw some ownership. I think I have yesterday's ownership still in here. I imagine they'll draw some ownership and some popularity, but I think it's just a very good spot, and you're hoping that they're going to back up your pitcher in that space. So it kind of jibes as a team stack as well. Maybe if you wanted to do it as like a 3-man and then roll a 1-off and a 4-man in with it, something like that would probably be a good construction.
All right. So the Mets, certainly a team that's going to be in play both on the mound and in the lineup tonight in DFS as they try to get going. And at least some signs yesterday. And Pete Alonso's homered now in a couple of games in a row. Michael Conforto was able to hit one, I think, off the top of the wall last night. So some cold bats starting to warm up a little bit. Jacob DeGrom, one of the best pitchers in baseball, the best pitcher in baseball. And he is there on the MLB top pitchers. That is free today on Awesemo.com. If you want to see how all the pitchers stack up, what their estimated ownership might be. If you're playing other sports, you have NBA ownership projections free at Awesemo.com, NHL ownership projections, MMA fighter rankings, all of that. So you can check that out again at Awesemo.com. Next up, let's get to Kansas City, Detroit. Mike Minor, Casey Mize. Maybe a chance for a value start. I know Mike Minor is liked as far as that the MLB top pitchers at Awesemo is concerned with value.
Yeah, it's a decent little price on Minor, 6,400 on FanDuel, 6,900 on DraftKings. Certainly a spot that you could potentially consider, at least on DK, as an SP2. Tigers have had some history against left-handed pitching over time where they've been good, and they do have some capable right-handed bats in this lineup, but I'm just looking at the board for where they rank out so far this season. Doesn't look like they've been performing against lefties very much at all. It's probably a pretty short sample. I don't have the total plate appearances in here, but it looks like they're dead last in no, I'm sorry, that's not dead last. They're dead last in the league in creating runs against lefties at 57% worse than average, which is pretty darn significant. Wow. They are striking out against lefties. Where the hell did they go? They were okay. Yeah, there it is. Fourth worst in baseball, 29.7%, 0.077 ISO. So I'm not reading that wrong. That's a 0.077, not a 0.77. So, I mean, they've just been struggling in the split. 1 home run so far against lefties this year. So, yeah, I think it's potentially a spot that you could go to that against Mike Minor and ride that history. Minor's not a pitcher that I get to a ton over time. He's around the league average guy in 2019, 208 innings, 23.2% strikeout rate, 4.25 xFIP, and a 1.24 whip. All of that is pretty much league average-ish. That's about who he is and about what we can expect, but he projects out fairly well against this lineup. Don't really see much need to go to any Tigers bats against him, even if you're thinking of him as a popular pitcher and being contrarian. There's just not a ton to love in there. If you wanted to do it, I would look to Jonathan Scope, Wilson Ramos, Heimer Candelario, some of the obvious names in the middle. I would be interested maybe in throwing some Casey Mees back the other way as well. I like that Royals lineup, but I think if he's a little bit sneaky, 7,200 is a reasonable price on FanDuel, 64 on DK. A high-end kid who's still not figured it out yet by any means, but could have one of those outlier starts. Pretty good strikeout kid. Ended up with a 19.5 last year and an 18.8 so far this year, but we're talking about 28 innings last year, 16 innings this year. I think there's more there. I don't know that it's going to flash today, but just as a mix-in type of option, I would maybe consider a few shares. He'll probably be somebody who I leave in my pool at least.
So some pitching to look at there, Minor and Mize going at each other there in Detroit. You can get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there with the Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. Now, this includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much more. We also have a special MMA deal running for UFC 261. Get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus MMA when you use promo code UFC 261. That's $14.98 for 30 days of Awesemo Plus MMA, which includes our fighter projections, ownership projections, and our top fighters tool, which compares projected ownership with the chances of any fighter being one of the top fighters. This offer is valid through Saturday, April 24th. That's tomorrow. So get on it. Stop guessing. Start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. You big MMA guy, Terry?
I'm not, actually. That's how I've kind of been couching that read when I've been doing it is I don't really follow MMA. I'm more of a traditional boxing fan if I'm picking a contact sport, a fighting sport. So just don't really enjoy, the submission holds. I tend to not really know what's going on. And then all of a sudden the fight's over with submissions. So it's just like, I don't know, never really excited me. But I do see, some interesting things in like highlights where a guy's flying across the ring with a Superman punch or something like that. Those can be cool and fun, but it hasn't really appealed to me. But what I love about it is the DFS side. I actually get into the site not knowing anything. I use our tools and I actually can win money with I lay out the top fighters tool and I'll hand build just a few lineups on a big UFC on the fish for the big pay-per-view fights with the big prize pools and stuff. But you can, not knowing anything, look at the top fighters tool and kind of build good lineups with it just based on what we're giving you in terms of guys' probability of being the top fighter, a woman's probability of knocking out her opponent. Got to throw the women in there. It's UFC. So it's just giving you all the tools that you need to win at this stuff. So it's really good. That's how I enjoy UFC.
It's like how I was doing with college basketball when it was March Madness. It's like, okay, I know one or two teams, but I can't make sense of any of this. And the Awesemo projections are out there, crunch those numbers and did well with it. And I didn't know what the heck I was looking at.
Yeah. It's really amazing how much we cover and how sharp everything is. You do not actually need to know what's going on. And more proof of that was in League of Legends, where we were all playing that during quarantine. A lot of people still playing it, still killing it, and still have no idea what's actually going on the screen in those games when they watch.
Just check in the next day and see if you won. But again, check out Awesemo Plus and use promo code UFC 261, 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus MMA. All right, let's get to your Yankees. They're in Cleveland. 6 runs on the board for the Yankees offense yesterday. So at least something going right there in the Bronx for a bit. Jordan Montgomery, Logan Allen, your pitching matchup. So I think we can expect some runs in Cleveland.
Yeah, I would think so. This would lead me more toward the bats. Montgomery having a decent year so far to start the season for the Yanks. I was trying to load up the ownership there. So 17 innings so far for Monty. Nice improvement in the strikeout rate up to 26.9%. He was 24-4 last season, 26-3, but only 4 innings pitched the year before, and wasn't a strikeout pitcher to that degree before his injury, before 2019. So that's interesting to see. He's made some changes to his pitch mix, to his dynamics, and the pitches that he throws and how he's throwing them. So it's really interesting watching that number climb, and his walk rate is stable. It's not a situation where he's walking a ton more hitters because of these new pitches that he's throwing. So he's doing well there, but I just don't totally trust it yet. And this Indians lineup is one that I like to get to for DFS purposes, particularly when they're priced down like they are on FanDuel today. Most of these hitters are in the 3,000 to mid to high 2s. So I think I can get to all of these hitters, particularly that top end of the lineup, 1 through 5 at least. I would throw Ahmed Rosario into that at 6. I could get to Josh Naylor, even though lefty, I would be a little worried about that. Don't know for sure if he's going to be in the lineup, but I do like his power on a lot of slates. On the Yankees side of things, I think there's every reason in the world to throw Yankees bats at Logan Allen. 19.2% strikeout rate for him so far this season, only 12 innings, only 10 innings last year, 14.3% strikeout rate, 14.3% walk rate. That's not going to be sustainable. 13.4% strikeouts and 10.2% walks the year before in only 27 innings. Very small major league sample on this kid, but I think there's plenty of reason to trust the Yankees' power. All those right-handed bats in the Yankees lineup, they're profiling out pretty well, and the prices are not caught up to their talent by any means. So getting to a guy like Gleyber Torres for $2,500, I will do that all day long. I love that kid. I have no worries about him. I know he's been in a bit of a slump, had a bad year last year. No worries whatsoever about him at shortstop. Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, kind of obvious names there. We'll see how the lineup shakes out as well. Yanks move some pieces around depending on the matchups, depending on who's in and who's out. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, 1 through 9, I don't really have issues with going to pretty much anybody who's going to be likely to be in that lineup tonight.
It feels like the Yanks are due for that 4-homer game, right? Where they ambush someone and the ball's flying out. And they get to go. I think getting out of the Bronx helps a little bit too with the pressure the team was feeling.
Yeah, everybody talks about, Yankee Stadium is a bandbox, easy to hit home runs and everything, but we do get the team comes through sometimes and it just isn't clicking right, and you do see it. It's good to get out of town, get out on the road, maybe a little refresher. The guys get together, they're in the hotels and everything, and a little bonding experience and all those different things. So yeah, narrative streetwise, I think that makes a ton of sense for the Yanks, and I'm hoping that that's the case, quite honestly, because it's tough to come back when you fall pretty far behind unless you go on a wild A's-like winning streak. And I don't know if this team has an A's-like winning streak in them this year. So they're going to need all the wins they can scrape together early. So hopefully this is it.
So you got to get that going for the Yankees, and Cleveland should be midge-free since it is the spring. So you don't have to worry about that. Right as you're doing the coffee. Almost got the spit take on that one. Almost. Not quite. Seattle, Boston. Yusei Kikuchi and Martin Perez going at one another. High over-under on this game at 9.5 at Fenway Park. We saw some runs last night, though you kind of had to wait until extra innings. I mean, the Mariners scored 7 runs on 3 hits all game. The ghost runner helps. Mitch Haniger hitting a big 3-run homer helps, obviously. And you had some parts of that Seattle stack come through eventually. Do you think we see some more fireworks at Fenway?
Yeah, Perez is a pitcher who it's funny. He used to have numbers that would be explosively high in like my home run model on the other side. And that's kind of calmed down a little bit over the last season and a half. But I think he's still a targetable lefty. And there are some good righty bats in that Mariners lineup. It's not as exciting on my board so far today, but they do project pretty well. So I'm going to be curious to see where they come in terms of ownership and all of that. I do like getting to some teams in Fenway Park, though. I think if I'm going to an offense in this game, it would probably be the Mariners, even though the Red Sox offense is much, much better in terms of quality of team. I just think I don't want to say I believe in Yusei Kikuchi yet, but he's getting there. I mean, the changes that we saw him make last season are holding up so far this year. I do think that there's something to be said about this kid at this point, and he's pretty good at keeping the ball on the ground, keeping the ball in the yard. 24.1% strikeout rate so far this year, brought the walks down to 7.6% from an ugly 10.3 that he was at last year. That helps improve the whip a little bit. The xFIP is under 4. There's a lot of reason to believe here. So the strides that he made last year seem like they could be real. That's not to say that I'm going to go to him as a starter, even at 7,900 on FanDuel, 7,200 on DK. If you wanted a few shares, as I assume a low-owned SP2, he's not terrible, but I just don't love the upside for him in this start. It's too good an offense on the other side. So while I'd be worried about stacking Red Sox just in terms of his ability to potentially limit them, I don't think that's going to lead me to him. So I'm probably off both pitchers. And if I was going to an offense, I think that I would prefer the Mariners here. I'm actually curious. I want to pull up the top stack. Do you have the top stacks in front of you by any chance?
Yeah, I can get to it.
I clicked over to the ownership. Just want to see where the Mariners and the Sox rank out for Alex.
So Alex, Seattle is under 6%, and Boston they're right in line with one another.
Yeah, right
Boston,
next to each
Seattle.
other. That's interesting. Yeah, and actually looks like more ownership coming down on the Mariners side of things on the DK slate, and then on FanDuel. It's early. We can give some of these away. The people who woke up early and hang out with us. I still consider it waking up early because COVID times is just weird. Like my old life, I had to wake up at 6 a.m. to get to work in time and 9. And now I can just kind of open my eyes and turn over and I'm at work at 9. So it's pretty nice. But yeah, let's see. FanDuel side of things, it looks like Boston gets out a little bit more ahead. But we do have a pretty flat board in terms of there's just so many teams on the slate today that the probability of success is you've got one team kind of spiking at the top and then a lot of teams that are flat in the middle. So that'll be an interesting one to watch through the day.
Another matchup. I think this is the game to watch of the 7:00 slate. Toronto, Tampa Bay, Steven Matz, who has been fantastic for Toronto, change of scenery, all that, but really pitching well. And Tyler Glasnow, who was always good. And something that he has done this year is add a slider. So Glasnow has this new pitch that he's throwing 29% of the time. And he was already terrific. He's kind of cut down on the changeup a little bit and not throwing the curveball as much. But that slider has been a fantastic pitch for him. Glasnow, 0.73 ERA coming in. So two pitchers that I think are throwing really well. So they're feeling good about themselves. But also, maybe the data isn't up on how good these guys can be with Matz in a different situation and Glasnow with this new pitch.
Yeah, I mean, Glasnow has just been dominant so far this year, striking out 40% of hitters exactly, only walking 7.8%, 2.36 xFIP, 0.65 WHIP. That is dynamite, particularly when you consider 7.8% walk rate. It's not bad by any means. It's a very good walk rate, but that's not suggestive of a guy with that low of a whip. So that just shows how few hits he's actually giving up, how little contact he's giving up. Just taking a look at him in StatCast real quick, we're talking about 98th percentile expected ERA, 97th percentile expected batting average allowed, 70th percentile on hard hit. So he's giving up a little bit of hard contact, but not anything to worry about because he's well above average. 98th percentile expected slugging percentage, 92nd percentile whiff rate, 98th percentile fastball velo, 98th percentile curveball spin, 56th percentile chase rate is surprising for a guy who's getting that many strikeouts. He's not making guys chase. He's just getting these strikeouts in the zone, pounding the zone with strikes. I love everything about Tyler Glasnow in this spot, except for the price. 11-2, I'm willing to pay it for him. I justified, paying up for further than that for Jake DeGrom, and I think all of that holds true for Glasnow here. Trickier matchup maybe than what DeGrom's looking at in terms of lineup. I think this is a better lineup. They strike out a little bit less. So far this year, Toronto is... let's call that 11th in the league with a 23.7% team strikeout rate. They're creating runs 15% worse than average against righties, though, and only a 0.134 team ISO against righties. Those numbers go up pretty decently in terms of the power. 0.195 ISO against righties the last 3 seasons, 103 WRC plus as a team, 253 home runs is... we'll call that like 5th or 6th in the league over that sample. So that dates back to the start of 2019 for the active roster. So it's a good team going up against him. I just think he is just supremely talented and has the ability to just sit these guys down. So even with their ability to limit the strikeouts, I think I come down pretty firmly on the Glasnow side of that one. Matz is an interesting conversation. It's interesting to watch. He was a high-profile prospect coming up. Never quite delivered on that for the Mets. Showed it in flashes. Like you said, got out of town. He's been great. 3.59 xFIP, 0.82 WHIP so far this season, 18 innings. 26.5% strikeout rate is up from where he was last year, well up from 2 years ago. I just don't know if I trust him yet. This Rays lineup is one that I think is good for sneaky power in a lot. They're profiling well for power for me today in my home run model. Part of that is legacy information from who Steven Matz was. It hasn't caught up to who Steven Matz might be now. But I'm still kind of riding with who Steven Matz was/is, and I'm not totally ready to jump off that train yet and jump onto the Steven Matz as an ace now train yet. I do think he's pitching well, but 95 is too much for me going up against this lineup. 89 on DK. If you wanted to do it as a spendy SP2, I wouldn't use him as an SP1, but as a spend up SP2 that probably wouldn't be rostered much in that spot, I guess. But
yeah, Matz isn't cheap. I mean, that's one of the things that you see on this night. Where Matt's 8,900 on DraftKings, and then on FanDuel, you're looking at 9,500 for Matt. So you're paying up for what he's doing. He's going to have to continue doing what he's doing there. But let me just ask real fast: DeGrom or Glasnow? You got to pick one. Who you taking tonight?
I'll probably pay up to DeGrom. Weaker lineup, guy that I trust more for just the absolute upside proven over time. So I would probably pay the extra 1,000 or whatever it is and get up to DeGrom. I just think there's so much to choose from too that. On the pitching side, it makes sense to kind of target those aces, and then we can spread bats around. There's just so many bats. And on FanDuel in particular, the pricing is just It's just wrong. Like, they just have not priced things properly. So I'm entering lineups every night with a ton of money left on the table just based on the way they've priced these things.
And that's what's been winning when you look at the optimal lineups the next day and what was the best lineup, and so many of them well under price over there. One of the biggest
winning lineup. My winning lineup from 2 weeks ago that took down the tournament left, I think, like 2,800 on the table on FanDuel.
Wow.
Like, it was a massive amount of money left on the table.
Yeah,
and you can do that in baseball. If you're getting to a well correlated stack, good lineups, good pitchers on top, it's probably not totally optimal approach for a slate this size. Like, there are ways that you can find to spend your money well on this slate, just given all the choices that we have and the spendy pitchers. But on smaller slates, when you don't have obvious ways to spend all your money, you don't have to in baseball. It's not like basketball. It's not like football, the rate-based stuff.
No, we were looking at it last week, and the best FanDuel lineup from last Thursday left like 20 grand on the table. It's not something you recommend, but it happens sometimes. It's just kind of one of those wonky things in baseball. One of the biggest edges you're going to find in sports betting is shopping to find the best line. Betting lines can change by the minute. They can vary greatly depending on which book you're using. So it's important to use Awesemo's Odds Shopper to find the best line available on the game or player prop you're betting on and give you that edge to help you beat the house. You can head on over to oddsshopper.awesemo.com, where we compile the best bets available for game lines, player props, player and team futures, all updated in real time. And it is a busy slate to keep track of tonight. 14 games on the line. We get to Arizona and Atlanta now. Ronald Acuna, I believe, is expected back. He's probably still in that questionable range if we were in the NFL world, but he was, as of a couple of days ago, expected to return today from this strained abdominal. So that could help the Atlanta lineup going up against Luke Weaver.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're talking about one of the best players in all of baseball coming back. Potential, 40-40, 50-50, I think, is in reach for this kid some years. So, yeah, he is just a monster of a player. 4,600, you're paying full freight for him on FanDuel. 63 on DK. They are pricing up the top end on DK aggressively this year. You're getting him for 63 and Freddie Freeman for 62. That becomes difficult to stack a lot of Braves. But this is a spot that I like. They hit right-handed pitching very well, and particularly if Acuna is back in that lineup, I think Luke Weaver is pretty targetable here. I do like Weaver in general as a pitcher. I think there's more talent in that arm than what we've seen. He's flashed upside from time to time. 26.5% strikeout rate 2 years ago over 64 innings, 23 and a third last year and over 52 innings, 21.2 so far this year. So it's actually declined since 2 years ago. But I think he's just working on figuring things out. And what I do like is that the xFIP is at 3.95 so far this season. The whip is at 0.84, only walked 1.5% of hitters. Walks something he's had issues with over time and putting too many base runners on. So that's a good sign for him. But it's just not a spot where I think we need to go to Luke Weaver. 7,600 on DK, 7,000 on FanDuel. Not projecting very well against what is a very good Braves lineup. Huascar Ynoa on the other side of things, similarly not projecting very well for me, but he didn't project very well in that dominant game that he had against the Marlins. What was that, 10 days ago or so? This is not that same matchup. Arizona's pretty decent at limiting the strikeouts against righties. So I don't see major upside here, but I was wrong about him the last time, so I don't want to totally cross him off at this point. There is some talent there, striking out 31.7% of hitters so far this season with a 2.45 xFIP and a 1.0 whip. That's totally out of nowhere compared to everything we've seen from him in the past. It's not a huge sample, 21 innings last year, 3 innings the year before. So we're not talking about much. But if he keeps that up, he would be a dominant spot at 6,900 on the FanDuel slate, 75 on DK. I just don't see it for this matchup. Not to say that I'm rolling out Diamondbacks against him. That's not for fear of him necessarily. It's just the way they project for me. They don't really pop. If you wanted to get to them as a value stack, they could probably make other things work for you, but I think there's probably other spots on the board just given the way that things are priced.
And the Braves, they need Ynoa with all the injuries they have in their rotation they're dealing with right now. So hoping that Huascar can bring something tonight against Arizona. Then you have the Angels and Astros. We'll see what happens with Mike Trout, the elbow contusion last night. After he's hit in the elbow right away, first inning, knocked out of the game. Andrew Heaney going for the Angels. It feels like every show I do with you, Terry, we have an Andrew Heaney sighting. And Zach Greinke coming off a big-time start gets potentially a good matchup against the Troutless Angels team. We'll see tonight for Houston.
Yeah, and that would obviously be a pretty big bat to be taking out of that lineup. It would probably make me I don't want to say that I would probably eye up Zach Greinke, but I will. It would probably make me eyeball Zach Greinke a little bit more. 8,700 on DK, 9,000 on FanDuel. We've talked about it. He's getting by just with his experience and knowing how to pitch at this point with the 87-mile-an-hour fastball, the 86-mile-an-hour changeup, and not much else other than location, location, location. So he is still serviceable, still gets it done. If Trout is out of that lineup, that's a Holsey enough lineup that I think he could dance through it. I do like David Fletcher up top. Ohtani is an obvious name. Jared Walsh having a nice start to his season. But then you're getting into Upton, Pujols, Iglesias, Suzuki, Rengifo in the projected lineup. Like, that is a different lineup without Anthony Rendon and without Mike Trout in it. So I would not have too many issues if I get some Zach Greinke shares. I don't want to go totally overboard with it unless it's a situation where he's just like ridiculously positively leveraged and looking good. So I'll wait and see in terms of how he shakes out later on, what that Angels lineup looks like. But overall, Greinke striking out just 16.2% of hitters this year, walks only 4%. So that's where he gains some ground, right? He doesn't strike out a lot of guys, but he's not putting a lot of extra guys on base. 4.4 xFIP, 1.01 whip is sparkling. So there's reason to believe, there's reason to trust. I don't truly believe, but it's there. He's doing it until he doesn't do it anymore. I think we can at least rely on Greinke to be that. Haney on the other side of things, tough matchup against these Astros bats. I think they're too good for him here. Strikeout pitcher, 33% strikeout rate this year, 28.9% over a bigger sample 2 years ago. I just think I would probably come down more on the Astros bats side of things with some of those big righty bats in that lineup.
All right, next up, the Pirates and Twins. JT Brubaker off to a really nice start for Pittsburgh. Enters with a 1.76 ERA. J Happ still chugging along in his lengthy career now. It's a tough matchup going against Minnesota. This is quite the test for Brubaker to see what he's all about.
Yeah, tough spot for the kid for sure. 27.3% strikeout rate with a 3.72 xFIP and a 104 whip so far this year. Like you mentioned, out to a nice start. Had to jump through some hoops in my model to get them to pop up because they're playing games with how they're naming them between this season and last season and site to site and all sorts of stuff, but still not getting a projection on him, unfortunately, through that. But I'm working on that in my model here. But just wanted to take a look. I was trying to stall for time to get the top.
Well, the pitcher's tool is free today, so I could say top two pitcher percentage for Brubaker is 5.7.
Okay, so not like explosively high up the board by any means. And that kind of jibes with the team that he's facing here. You mentioned it's a tough matchup against these Twins. A lot of professional hitters, a lot of power. They don't grade out like crazy for me. And I think it's partly due to what he's been able to do so far this year on the mound. So their power numbers are actually down from what I normally expect the Twins' power numbers to be for me in my home run model. But it's not a spot, I think, where that justifies going to JT Brubaker here. 8,300, probably too much on this slate on FanDuel. 78, if you wanted to work him in as an SP2 on DK, I don't totally hate it. I wouldn't go nuts with it. I would watch where the public is and be, around that mark maybe. It's not completely insane if I'm just looking at where that ranks out, that 5.7. So like I said, if it's true for pitchers too, particularly when we're getting the two of them, outside of the top 5 guys who are the obvious names on this slate, that 5.7 you mentioned ranks pretty well comparatively to some of these other guys. And Brubaker's not expensive. So, I mean, it makes sense from that regard. It's just not the best matchup out of all the ones we have to choose from for an SP2. J Happ on the other side, the only thing I'll say about him is I found out that he's taller than I thought he was.
How tall is he?
I think it was like 6'5".
Okay. Yeah,
I
big guy, and he's not getting any lift from the hair. It's not like a Jimmy Neutron 6'5".
Yeah, for sure. But to go a little further on that one, the Pirates are not a team to fear by any means. But J Happ, not a big time strikeout pitcher, not a big time pitcher at this point in his career. 4.34 xFIP last season with a 105 whip was fine over 49 innings. Only a 21.4% strikeout rate, down to 19.4, only 8 innings so far this year, but walking 11.1% of hitters. We've seen this story with J Happ. We kind of know who he is. 161 innings in 2019, 20.7% strikeout rate, 5.22 xFIP, 1.30 whip. He's a guy who's going to be in that mid-4s to 5 xFIP range, putting guys on base, not striking a ton out. Not a DFS pitcher for me. I don't know that means I'm going to target Pittsburgh bats, but they are super cheap, and they do have some upside in there. So like a Gregory Polanco's got a little sneaky upside, a Colin Moran, a Brian Reynolds, a Kevin Newman from the top. I don't love Phillip Evans in there, but he's in the 2-hole in the projected lineup. I could get to some Pittsburgh stacks. just kind of as a contrarian approach. Not one I'm going to go nuts with, but they'll be in my pool.
You know, playing the Pirates in a stack is like playing MMA to me. Like we were talking about MMA before, where you're kind of playing the numbers, not so much the names. I'm like, I think I know half these guys. Maybe it's there's not a whole lot of star power there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, every now and then I look at this team and a couple others in the league, and it's like that scene in Major League where they're looking at the roster and they have no idea who the names are. This guy here is dead.
Yeah, so, but then you get a homer or something, and you're feeling good about it.
Yeah, hey, all of a sudden you know who Jacob Stallings is and why, and you start caring about him.
Bada bing, bada boom. We love to see the successes of our Awesemo Plus members. Especially if you hit on, say, a pirate stack, let us know about it. Hit us up at Awesemo HOF or on our personal Twitter handles. And look, we'll give you, if you use our tools, advice, content, let us know. We'll give you the retweet. And you see so many people having success as part of this day in and day out. So it's certainly great to see. And if you have that big night and we're able to help you out a little bit, make sure to give the big tweet out to at Awesemo HOF and check all that out. But yeah, you can see some winners there.
Yeah, I work the support box most days as my customer success role. And that's really the best part of doing support. I'm always happy to talk to people and solve the problems with their subscriptions and everything and all the trouble you guys manage to get into with your subscriptions. But man, it is great seeing those wins come in and seeing people send screenshots winning. A lot of people win life-changing money, right? And those are amazing to see. But we get ones where it's, hey, I won a few $100. Some people get excited because they won $40, but it was the first time they won. It's just so cool to see people learning and using the tools and really gaining from us. I just want to shout out one guy who's in my little study group and in our DFS 101 channels. And Ben P in our Slack chat sent me a little note this morning just saying thanks, kind of along these lines. He says, started NBA season with a little less than 200 combined between his two accounts. He's withdrawn up to over $1,000 so far and still has 2,500 in one and 470 in the other one. He's been crushing it. Wow. Just kind of jumped in behind the scenes in Slack. He's been participating in the DFS 101 channel. He's been asking me questions on the side. He's been tuning into the game plan shows, which are like invaluable. And we talk about things like our Excel sorting tables and stuff in those. So there's a lot going on behind the paywall with everything as well. So just getting in on one of the platinum plans, pretty cheap, gets you access to everything. You can turn your game around and start winning like Ben P was. So great work, Ben. If you're out there listening, congrats again, man.
That's fantastic. And it's not just the money, man. It's fun to beat people. You're outwitting people, right? I mean, I'm competitive as can be. That's what I enjoy is, not just the dollar signs at the end of it, but hey, I beat so-and-so and beating us in a lot of these things. It's that's what's fun.
Absolutely.
Figuring it out.
Absolutely. And I know there are names when I'm sweating a tournament, right? If I might be in first or maybe I'm chasing somebody or whatever, I'm always looking at the names around me, and it's never, oh man, I don't want to lose the 30 grand. It's, oh man, I don't want this guy to beat me for it. That one guy who's chasing me up the standings. I don't want it to be that guy because I know who that is and I know how he plays. So yeah, those competitive juices definitely get flowing.
All right, let's hit one of your favorites here. Dylan Cease on the mound for the White Sox as he goes up against Dane Dunning, off to a nice start for Texas.
Yeah, revenge game for Dane Dunning as well, if you're into narratives. He's a very high-end prospect. I like the kid a lot. 27.6% strikeout rate so far this year with a 308 xFIP and a 0.80 whip. Definitely a good spot. A tough spot going up against the White Sox. I was thinking the other way for Cease. It's a good spot for Cease. Tough spot for Dunning going up against these White Sox. But I do think he's got the talent. There's plenty of strikeouts in this lineup for him. It's just another one of those cases where he's priced pretty appropriately at 8,500 for who we think he is and what this matchup is. 7,300 on DK. I think I could sneak in some shares of him as an SP2. It's a little bit of a dice roll given the quality on the other side. Tim Anderson, Adam Eaton, Juan Moncada, Jose Abreu, Yasmani Grandal, Luis Robert. I mean, there are names in that lineup. There is talent in that lineup, but there's plenty of strikeouts. I think he could have a good game. It's just on the FanDuel slate. I think we've got other options, and same thing on the DK slate. Like you can shop around for options. So I don't know that I want to run him into the buzzsaw of the Chicago White Sox here. Cease on the other side, you mentioned he's one of my guys. I am always happy to go to him. This is a killer matchup for strikeouts. He costs 6,600 on both sites. We've got an absurd volume of pitchers to choose from. He projects well for me. I'm reluctant to push people into him because he's got a 14.3% walk rate. He's got a 1.71 whip so far this season, 23.8% strikeout rate in his 14 innings. But like the other numbers, the walk rate, the whip, all of that is consistent with what we've seen from him. 73 innings in 2019, 58 innings last year. He's a kid who's struggling to find his command, find his control. When he does, I think he's going to be an elite strikeout artist. I don't know, like I said last time around, I don't know that that's going to come tonight. I am willing to roll the dice, but I don't want to push too many people into doing it alongside me. So it's a tough spot, but if he's going to do it, this is one of the better spots he's going to have to do it all year. This Texas team just strikes out like crazy. So I'm willing to do it. Do it at your own risk. I will certainly throw a few White Sox stacks at Dane Dunning, even though I believe in him as a pitcher.
And for Cease, is he kind of in that like play him but don't watch him category if he's walking the ballpark and that kind of thing? It's frustrating.
Yeah. I think that's very apt. I think that's the right way to do it. If you want to play him and maybe check in on your scores like every half hour to find that point, like it'll be good, and then your lineups won't be at the top anymore because he blew up. That's kind of the experience we're having. But just to put a button on Texas strikeout numbers, active roster so far this year, worst in baseball, 29.5% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching. That is brutally bad. Over the 3-year sample back to the start of 2019, also worst in baseball against right-handed pitching. So for the last 3 seasons, 26.5% strikeout rate. So they've actually gotten worse striking out against right-handed pitching from their mark that was already the worst in baseball.
Again, you're watching the MLB Strategy Show here, PeteyMac with Terry McBride. It's brought to you by Odds Shopper. On one of the biggest edges in sports betting, you got to shop to find the best line. Make sure you're using Awesemo's Odds Shopper to find those best lines. It'll do all the work for you. You don't have to go to 15 different sites, and you can see where you can get your best price and try to beat the house. So check out oddsshopper.awesemo.com, all updated in real time. Coors, well, one more. Cincinnati, St. Louis. I don't have a whole lot on this game. Sonny Gray against Kwang Young Kim. Anything jump out to you here before we get to Coors?
I think it actually might be an underrated spot for Sonny Gray. 28.6% strikeout rate this year, struggling with his walks, 9.5% walks. We saw the walks up last season to 11.1%. It brought his whip up to a 1.21 from the 108 that it was at last year. 185 whip so far this season, but that's a lot of statistical noise. Pretty good pitcher. 8,100 on the Fanduel slate is definitely interesting to me. I get a nice projection on him. He's one of my higher projected pitchers on Fanduel. 9,300, I think maybe takes him off the board. Not entirely, but it definitely doesn't make him as appealing on the DraftKings slate unless it's creating a big leverage situation for you. Like if people are unwilling to pay for Sonny Gray there, then I think maybe it makes some sense to start looking into some Sonny Gray shares. Cards this year, 26% team strikeout rate, 23rd overall in baseball. So one of the worst teams in terms of striking out against righties. So I think there's opportunity for Sonny here. I do like Goldschmidt, Arenado, Tommy Edman as a trio at the top of that lineup. Paul DeJong has some power from further down that lineup, but there's just enough strikeouts here that I think Sonny could have a nice little start for 8,100. So I'll consider him.
One word of caution on Gray. He had a back issue that held him out for the latter portion of spring training. His last start was his first of the season, only 71 pitches, and they pulled him in the middle of the 5th inning. Not sure you're getting 100 pitches out of him tonight.
That I missed. Thank you for that. And that's actually important because of the volume of pitching choices that we have, right? So even if we're projecting Sonny out, if we shave off a little bit on the innings, on the pitch count, that definitely would bring him down the board. That's a great call. That had escaped my attention. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we'll just you guys see how it plays out. It's some teams are more aggressive than others when it comes to handling little aches and pains that these guys have. Coors Field next up. Of course, the highest run total on the slate at 10.5. Philadelphia is the team to take a look at there. Are you be loading up on Phillies tonight? Do you fade this one? How are you playing Coors Field tonight?
I might be loading up on Rockies bats.
Really?
Vince Velasquez at Coors Field, that just that screams offense to me. I don't know. Velasquez, a hilarious in his 4-inning sample, so temper what you're getting from this, but a hilarious 40.9% strikeout rate and 36.4% walk rate. Again, 4 innings. We're not talking about very many hitters there. 29.9% over 34 innings last year strikeout rate, 11% walk rate, 25.2 over 117 innings in the strikeout rate year before that. His issue's always been putting too many guys on base. The control's always an issue. He is a good strikeout pitcher when he's on, making guys chase. I just don't trust Vince Velasquez as far as I can throw him. I would certainly not roster him here. And I think there's definitely upside with his propensity to put guys on base. Even if you're not getting the home run ball, I think you can just see guys circling the bases at Coors Field on doubles and triples all day long. So give me some Rockies bats here. Hopefully they go a little bit under the radar, a little bit under owned. It's a Coors game, so they're going to get ownership like always. But I think more people will flock to the Philly side of things. And for me, I don't actually hate the idea of, if that's the case, it's not the situation where like I'm going to roster Herman Marquez because of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's an okay pitcher at Coors Field anyway. I don't love the matchup, but if I ended up with a handful of Herman Marquez shares, I wouldn't totally hate it for 6,500. I want to make sure I was using the absolute best possible bats with him there, but I think there's maybe enough edge at that price where you can sneak that past some people. I think he's got upside there. It's dicey. It is not a safe play. It's a tournament play and a small shares kind of a play across 150 lineups.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is on the board. He is good enough at home, better numbers at home over the course of his career than on the road. So I don't hate that, but I would definitely roll a bunch of Phillies bats back against it if I was to do it. So I'll have a little bit of everything in this one, except for Vince Velasquez.
Find a little contrarian fun in Herman Marquez, and just stay away from Vinny Velasquez tonight. Miami, San Francisco, Sandy Alcantara, Alex Wood. I doubt Kurt Casale is catching, but are you up on the little history that he's making? Casale has caught 5 consecutive shutouts. That's the record is 6. And that was done in 1903. What's really interesting, though, is Casale's catching Johnny Cueto, Anthony DeSclafani, Kevin Gausman, Aaron Sanchez last night, Alex Wood. It's all 5 different pitchers and not exactly Hall of Famers there in San Francisco. So I guess, next time Casale's behind the plate, start looking at that Giants pitcher a little bit.
Yeah, I guess so, man. Wow, that didn't escape my attention as well. That's amazing.
Elias Sports Bureau coming through, one of those little oddities. And I know last night.
That's what I love about baseball. There's so much of that. So much fun.
I ended up with a lot of like Giant stacks popping up, and they scored 3 in the first. I was like, this is great. And then that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a situation for me as well. I ended up swapping to a good amount of them, and kind of let us down a little bit there. But going up against Sandy Alcantara here, tough spot. I think he's a pretty good pitcher. 28% strikeout rate over 24 innings so far this year. 22% last year over 42 innings. But a 404 xFIP, a 119 WHIP. Pretty effective pitcher. Not nearly as good the year before that, but kind of was rounding into form last season. So I'm excited to see what he's got for us overall through the course of this year. I don't know if it's a spot where I'm going to him. 8,000 on FanDuel. He projects as like a middling option for me. 7,400 on DK. If you wanted to put him into the mix as an SP2 on DK, I wouldn't totally hate it. I get a good enough projection to justify that salary. So I could go to that. I could also probably get to some of at least the top end of the Giants lineup here. Not in big shares by any means, but I like some of the hitters in that lineup in terms of your Tommy La Stella, Yaz, Longoria, Belt, Dickerson, even Posey, particularly on DK where you need a catcher, out to a strong start so far this season. I doubt many people are going to be paying $4,500 for Buster Posey in this spot, so you could get there. Alex Wood on the other side, probably not rolling him against the Marlins here. I just don't think he's necessary with all these choices that we've got on the board. 77 on FanDuel, 71 on DK, kind of appropriately priced for who he is. Pitching well to start the season, but it's only 5 innings, so I can't really put much faith in the numbers. 12 innings last season, 35 innings the year before. Just hasn't pitched a lot over the last few years. So I think I'd be more inclined to throw out some Marlins, particularly if they're low owned, which here to maybe be the case to start the day anyway. Got some very good right-handed bats in there, particularly against lefties with Jesus Aguilar. Adam Duvall hits both sides of the plate very well for power. Garrett Cooper's got a little pop. Louis Brinson is an underrated young player. Jazz Chisholm, if he's leading off, is interesting to me. So there's some interesting pieces in that Marlins stack.
And keep in mind, top pitchers free today at Awesemo.com. So you can look into Alcantara, Alex Wood, and then our final matchup, Yu Darvish and Clayton Kershaw. These Padres-Dodgers games have just been phenomenal. Big-time double play turned on a 105-mile-per-hour bullet last night to San Diego. Evens the series with the Dodgers on the season at 2-2. You get Yu Darvish and Clayton Kershaw going at each other. Star power on each side. These games are great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we kind of knew that coming into the season that this was going to be a heated rivalry throughout the year and just, the Battle of Southern California. There's everything to like about this. It's two very well constructed teams, a lot of star power on the Dodgers side, good amount of star power on the Padres side, but a little bit more anonymity through parts of that lineup, which is kind of what leads me toward liking the Dodgers side of things more in terms of if I were to go to one of these teams, which one would I stack? I think that answer is still the Dodgers. Padres against left-handed pitching, they haven't been struggling, but they're at best league average, 14% below average in terms of creating runs, right around league average in their 25.6% strikeout rate. Back into strikeouts this year are up across the board, by the way. Once you get to like the middle around 14, 15, those numbers just spike compared to where they were last year for those same ranked teams. So strikeouts just up in general, but the Padres striking out a fair amount of the time and not creating runs against lefties. On the other side, the Dodgers are very good at creating runs, very good at preventing, 33% better than the average at creating runs against righties, 22.5% strikeout rate is in the top 10. 217 team ISO is second in the league against righties. We're talking about one of the best right-handed pitchers in all of baseball who can strike anyone out. So there's not an issue there. But if I was picking a stack to go to, it would be the Dodgers because of that. And that would kind of be the same story in terms of the pitchers, right? I was explaining it the other way around. But that would lead me to more Kershaw going up against the Padres, despite a higher price on FanDuel, higher price on DK as well, and less Darvish coming the other way. I will definitely have shares of both pitchers, though.
But less than, say, Glasnow or DeGrom when we look at the entirety of the board tonight.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of projection, these two are like right next to each other, and that's several pegs down from where those other guys are, with a few of those mix-in guys in between. So these two teams, just the matchup is taking a little bit of giving enough of a haircut to both Darvish and Kershaw that I'll get to some of them. Most of my shares of them will probably come from crunches that I run with Alex's projections, or I'll give them little nudges in Fantasy Cruncher to get a little bit more of them, do some deliberate things in my lineup selection, which you can do a little bit more in baseball. I'm more comfortable giving Fantasy Cruncher little nudges in baseball than I am in the rate-based stuff like basketball.
How about just looking at the slate overall? You have some big-time pitchers going. We talked about DeGrom and Glasnow. You have this great matchup with the Padres and the Dodgers, more from a baseball point of view. And then you have Coors Field in play. Philly stack, you like the Rockies big-time offensively tonight. There's a lot happening when it's 14 games. It's tough to land on that right team when you have 28 options to try to stack out there.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about a few of the offenses that I like, going through the day. I think Oakland was right in there. We talked about them as a matchup. The Yanks, obviously, I'm going to have a bunch of them as a big homer, but I think they're definitely on the board for everyone else. We talked about Boston and Seattle. I like both sides of that. We talked about the Twins potentially being in a good spot. So there's upside for days in terms of the bats. You can get to some leverage stacks. You can play a lot of ins and out type of games just by using the top stack tool in conjunction with everything you're doing. Open up the top pitchers that's free and put that next to the top stacks. It helps you make a lot of these decisions and find the good spots to weave in and out of.
Yeah, and the A's, another team that could go off offensively, getting the opportunity at Baltimore against Jorge Lopez. Thanks so much for joining us on the show. Be sure, subscribe to all of our content here at Awesemo, and still a lot coming your way. Coming up next, UFC 261 Monkey Knife Fight Picks and Strategy. That's starting up in a minute. At 2 Eastern, the NHL Strategy Show, 3:30 the tip-off, and then 4:30 MLB Live Before Lock. So Awesemo has you all locked in all day long here on YouTube. Our thanks to Odds Shopper sponsoring the show. Terry McBride, my man. I'm PeteyMac, and our producer Tyler. Thanks to him. Happy stacking, guys.